Do you want to go ahead and call the roll?
Yeah. Good afternoon, directors. I'm taking the role. Director Melanie Bagby had informed me that she's planning on attending remotely, but she's not on the call right now. Director Janice Cater-Thompson. Present. Director Chris Corsi. Here. Director Gerard Giudice. Here. Director Susan Harvey.
Here.
Director Nisa Hinton.
Here.
Director Ariel Kelly had informed me that she would not be in attendance today. Director Sandra Lowe had informed me that she will be remoting in later, but I don't see her on the attendance list also. Director David Rabbit. Here. Director Rosa Reynosa had informed me that she would not be in attendance today. And then Vice Chair Linda Hopkins.
Present.
And Chair Chris Rogers.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum with 10.
And I do see Director Bagby is connecting right this moment.
Connecting to audio.
All right,
All right.
you're in, Director. Perfect. We'll go to public comment for items not on the regular agenda. If you'd like to provide comment, go ahead and approach the podium.
Chair Rogers.
Oh.
Item 2 of the agenda is remote disclosures.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had done that.
Because I have to
Just
read
one
the
moment, go ahead.
record for Director Bagby. Let's see, where is it under emergency? Yeah, so Director Bagby had notified me this morning that she'll be participating remotely pursuant to AB 2449 based on an emergency circumstance. She had informed me that she is ill and will be staying home for the duration of this meeting. Director Bagby, do you have anyone else over the age of 18 present at your remote location with you?
No, I do not.
And then we need a vote of approval with the motion and a second to approve the emergency remote.
All right, I'm looking for a motion.
Second.
So I got a motion from Director Giudice and a second from the Vice Chair. If you could please call the roll.
I'll do roll call. Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Cater-Thompson,
Here.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Hinton,
Yes.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes, and thanks for not getting us sick.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye,
And we see that passing.
perfect. All right. On then to public comment. Go ahead, Mr. DeWitt.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I'm hoping that some of you may have remembered a man by the name of Stephen Schneider. He was a doctor of environmental sciences at Stanford University. He was on the IPCC. One of the things that he talked about before the climate conference of the parties 15 in 2009 being held in Copenhagen, Denmark, was that there needed to be some sort of oversight where people could actually look at the claims, the environmental claims, and see the validation of that. I got to thinking about that as I was cleaning a plastic bag, and I'm sure when you guys are washing your plastic bags to reuse them, you see that there on the side, it says the environmental claims validation. It points out that people do this as a profession to make sure that what people are talking about actually occurs. I believe that needs to happen also with governmental agencies. We don't really have a validation organization, but we certainly could make that happen with you folks because you have this Regional Climate Protection Authority and you have this Sonoma County Transportation Authority. You could make them a claims validation type of organization. Now, at that conference in 2009, there was a good man there by the name of Jan Artus Bertrand. You may have seen one of his books. This one here, Earth from Above, 365 Days. He's the French man that flies up above and looks down at the ground and sees what's really happening, a form of ground truthing. The reason I bring this up is because here in Sonoma County, the city of Santa Rosa's footprint is almost as large as San Francisco's now. It's almost that size, but it has 1/5 the population of San Francisco. Essentially, Santa Rosa for 60 years, notwithstanding the two members that are here from Santa Rosa government in the past, it's not about them, has been an urban sprawl, suburban sprawl type of model. You folks are the ones that talk about you're going to have an approach to limit that sprawl and get us more city-centered growth. Now, one of the dilemmas that occurs is that many governmental organizations use the term city, looking at it like anywhere on their city limits, as far out as the farthest edge of the city limits, 7 miles across, rather than right downtown where their city-centered growth needs to occur. Santa Rosa is that model. We should ask Jan Bertrand to come here and do an overhead of ours, and then we could share that. You could do it with Google, but that's not as much fun. And the thing of it is he knows this area. He's a Frenchman, he drinks wine, he'll come over here. So the idea is that you folks in your allowances for money to go out and dispersals and all that type of stuff, look into this idea of getting city-centered growth to actually mean using the buses in downtown of any town or city. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Dwayne. Come on up.
My name is Bob Chipola. I live in Larkfield, next door to Tom Shopton Field Regional Park. A number of you have heard my words already on the subject. I'm an approach, so I'd like to use the words of Maya Angelou to say, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. Now, we have a problem. My neighborhood in particular has a problem with plastic grass growing in the next door regional parks, the next door to my neighborhood. I'm hoping that we can stop that from proliferating further as the parks has planned. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. I diligently talk about this whenever I can in public forums to assure people that that's not the way of the future. Plastic grass is not our future. I know it's been done in previous situations. Our drought has been a very serious thing for consideration. And some of the decisions have been made with that in mind. Others have been made with money in mind or with expediency in mind. And those things aren't as commendable, but the drought certainly made us decide some things that we might not decide under other circumstances. So I'm expecting today to hear from a colleague with a resolution asking you folks to support a resolution to halt the approval of plastic grass in public spaces. We can do this. You folks have the authority to create a resolution. And I'm hoping that the Board of Supervisors would support that resolution if it comes to pass. So again, Bob Chipola, Larkfield. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. We have any other comments here in the room? How about on Zoom?
Yeah, so we currently have 3 members of the public wishing to speak through Zoom, and we'll start with Taryn Obaid. Taryn, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this meeting today. I would, this comment is about Forever Chemicals, which is plastic artificial grass. The plastic grass that are in the synthetic turf sports fields. I am an analyst and I recently completed environmental law training, and 15 attorneys spoke on various aspects of the Water Quality Act, about soil health, about liability. And the forever chemicals in synthetic turf break down in the sun and they seep into the soil and they get into our water system. We are one big watershed here in Sonoma County, and we have agricultural economy that we must protect. When PFAS are the forever chemicals, when they get into the water wells, it has been shutting down those water wells, often water wells that ag businesses rely on. This is a disaster that is unfolding like a train wreck. Up in Sacramento, there are bills to stop it, to prevent the installation and replacement of artificial turf. They are not only made of synthetic forever chemicals, but they are also a huge carbon footprint. They're not recyclable, not anywhere. There are the equivalent of acres and acres and acres of landfill of this rolled up discarded turf because it only lasts 8 to 10 years and then it has to be torn up and replaced. The cost effectiveness of synthetic turf disappears at the second replacement. Natural grass is much cheaper. Also, it doesn't have the heat island effect of synthetic turf. Synthetic turf on a 90-degree hot summer day gets up to 140 degrees. I was talking with soccer players on the synthetic field, and their cleats melt in the summer. It is so hot. They have heat strokes and they have to get off the fields. It's a huge lawsuit risk. Please Google it. We should please do whatever we can, find every opportunity, please, climate commissioners. Go to other committees, talk to the supervisors. Please present a letter on your next agenda to send to the Board of Supervisors. This is a huge liability. Cities are getting sued, companies are getting sued, and the management companies that manage synthetic turf are also getting sued. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have is Catherine Dodd. Catherine, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Okay, I've unmuted myself. My name is Catherine Dodd. I'm a registered nurse and environmental health consultant, and I live in the Wickiup area, which is unrepresented by a city. And so you are my climate protectors. And I too am speaking about plastic grass, AKA artificial turf, synthetic turf. And I forwarded a draft resolution, which obviously can be changed. I worked for Supervisor Kevin Shelley in San Francisco and Mayor Newsom in San Francisco, and I was a district director for Congresswoman Pelosi. So I know it's easier to provide a draft for people to work from than it is to start from scratch. But some of the key, and I believe you have it, some of the key whereases include that we've just in the past 5 years learned more about what the hazards of artificial turf is. In Australia, they began banning it in the early 2000s. And they, of course, have a much worse drought than we do and worse fires than we've had. On the East Coast, Connecticut and Massachusetts have taken action to eliminate artificial turf. Here in Millbrae, they have passed a moratorium and of any future contracting or installation until a report can be done and an ordinance passed for what kind of safe turf should be used. Artificial turf has to be replaced every 8 to 10 years, and it becomes part of our landfill. The chemicals, the dangerous chemicals that are in it, PFAS in particular, continue to contaminate, and it off-gases methane, which contributes to climate. These are fossil fuel based products, and we have to decrease the demand for them and decrease the heat islands that they create. It's soccer fields in heat above 70 degrees have to be washed off. When they wash those off, that tiny grass that's disintegrating puts PFAS right into our stormwater, into our groundwater. When they wash those off, the chemicals that pad the artificial grass wash away. And sometimes it's tire crumbs, sometimes it's other synthetic products, but it's dangerous for kids to play on. If the grass is hot and the kids fall, they get burns. Because it's so hot. This is a climate issue. It's a health issue. The proposed Shopland Fields that Bob Chipola talked about are right next to a wetland, which is one of our solutions for climate. And so the moratorium, we're asking for a moratorium until this can be studied and looked at the effects on climate, on the effects on water quality, the effects on human health. And we're asking we'd like you to ask the county supervisors to provide education to local municipalities on how to implement replacement opportunities with natural turf. They're used all over on the East Coast, and they will sequester carbon. We're also asking.
Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, you have all this in writing. This is really important. The Board of Supervisors, the supplier.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Next we have is Lendry Proussel. Lendry, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm president of FACTS, Families Advocating for Chemical and Toxic Safety. I live in Petaluma, California. We recently had an 8-year-old talk to our city council about plastic grass, and she kept saying plastic is drastic. And I can think of her sweet face when I'm associating myself with the comments of the last 3 speakers. I do, if we want to walk the walk and walk the talk, or whatever it is on climate, we really need to stop doing these sort of antiquated practices that maybe we think we're doing it for water saving, but in reality, it's just going to make a whole bunch of more problems. And recycled water can be used. There are grasses now that we know that are low water. There are solutions. We can do this. Oracle Park, I was just on a Department of Pesticides award for Oracle Park because they're able to manage their parks in such an amazing way with natural turf. Beyond Pesticides has an organic parks program that focuses on natural turf. And there is actually a grant that they're going to be bringing an expert from Osborne Organics on the East Coast to come to Marin. It starts this fall. It's a Zoom free training. We could have officials from parks departments all over the county be part of that already paid for grant to learn how to manage our parks naturally so we don't need plastic grass. And then there'll actually be an in-person component in the fall. So there are solutions out there, and we're asking for a moratorium so that we can have some time as a county to figure out what those solutions are, so that we don't have to subject our kids, our waterways, and such to more toxic chemicals. That's the wrong direction.
All right. Thank you, Landry. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public with their hands up to speak on items not on the regular agenda. I also would like to put into the record that we received pre-submitted public comments from the Sebastopol Climate Action Committee from Catherine Dodd, Judith Eam, and Dwayne DeWitt. These documents have been provided to the SCTA and RCPA Board of Directors and will be posted online after today's meeting.
Great, thank you so much. And just as a brief reminder for folks, items that were not on the agenda, we can't get into a discussion about today, but we can certainly take that information back. We can talk about a future item if we so choose. With that, Drew, let's move on to our consent calendar. So board, we have a number of consent items. We have 4.1, it's our meeting notes from March 13th. We have item 4.2, it's an update on the water upgrade save contract. Item 4.3, an update to our Measure M 2022 strategic plan. Item 4.4, the cooperative funding agreement for bicycle and pedestrian program on Santa Rosa Avenue. We have item 4.5, Measure M maintenance of effort compliance with the Public Utilities Code. 4.6, our notice of fiscal year 2023-2024 appropriation limit adoption. So I will first see if there is any public comment on our consent calendar today. Come on up, Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, sir. Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland, item 4.4, Measure M. It's a good thing in some ways that you're giving money to the city of Santa Rosa to do a bicycle and pedestrian improvement upon Santa Rosa Avenue between Sonoma Avenue and Maple. One of the things, though, that I think is really important, especially to recognize today, which is the last day for public comment for MTC, public participation, is that there's not a lot of public participation in the city of Santa Rosa on the planning for these types of bicycle measures. I say that from experience because I served on the 2007 Roseland Community-Based Transportation Plan Committee. At the time, it was pretty much like their way or the highway. Staff telling us what they were going to do and then wanting us to go along with that. I'm a bicycle rider. I basically look at it like it's a good thing to have more bicycle lanes, but you have to have them in a way and in a place where people are actually going to use them. There's going to be bicyclists using those lanes. This type of thing only will happen if you folks, as an oversight body, push on the jurisdictions that come forward and ask for money and say, will this actually be something that people are using? How many bicyclists go up and down that road at that time? Is it worth the money that you're putting forward? One of the things that I'd like to point out, and this is really important, is that in the past, one of the city staffers over there at Santa Rosa, it was always about what was downtown. And it was never about the outlying areas, even as we did the Roseland Community-Based Transportation Plan, where we need bicycle paths. where we need safety and there's more people ride bicycles over in that area. What happened recently is a perfect example for you to keep in mind. The city of Santa Rosa approved putting in 7 housing units on the corner of what's called Barham Avenue and Dutton Avenue. The stipulation was to get 7 because 2 were going to be affordable housing units. 5 was the original, gave them a bonus. Well, the city planner who was handling it decided, you know what? The bicycle path needs to come first and knock out the 2 affordable housing units, even though they got a variance on a creek setback. So once that occurred, 50 feet, as long as this room is a bicycle path on a road with no other bicycle path. And it's in a spot where nobody rides bicycles at that spot. There's no oversight on it. We can't get anybody to really listen. And you know what? None of those houses are occupied now because they're market rate and they're up for sale. And the affordable units didn't get built, which is against everything that you folks are about. You're trying to get affordable housing units as close to downtown as possible with alternative transportation being implemented. It's only going to happen if you folks up here who hold the purse strings say to the people who ask, this is the only way you're going to get the funding, is if we can verify that we're actually going to have people using a bike path. That one on Dutton Avenue is not getting used. It's unsafe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dwayne. Are there any other comments? Drew, anybody on Zoom?
I do not see any members of the public on Zoom who wish to speak on the consent calendar.
All right, I'll bring it back, see if there's any questions, comments, or a motion.
I'll move the consent.
Second.
We have a motion from Director Rabbit and a second from Director Harvey. Let's go ahead and call the vote.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Cater Thompson,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Hinton,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins,
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And we see that passing.
All right. Madam Executive Director, let's go on to item 5.1, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have some slides to pull up for that item, and Tanya will lead us off. Good afternoon, directors. So I'm going to start off with a brief update on the status of our climate protection initiative, and then I'll hand it over to Suzanne to go through the funding options piece of the item. Well, I'll just go ahead and dive into my update. So first of all, in terms of our 3 program committees, as you may remember, we have a committee looking at building projects, a committee looking at land and water, and a committee looking at transportation. Those committees have started meeting in February and March, and have meetings scheduled this month as well. We've had great attendance at the meetings. They're all being connected via Zoom, except for our transportation committee, which is a hybrid meeting. And those committees are starting to put together draft lists of project and program ideas that ultimately will be coming to you for review and input. We are also working towards a community workshop on April 19th. And pleased to announce that Congressman Jared Huffman has agreed to join us and kick off that meeting with some opening remarks, talking about the importance of the local grassroots work that we have going on here, as well as an update on what's happening at the federal level regarding climate. And then our program committee chairs will give brief updates on the project lists as they're starting to come together, and give the community in attendance at the workshop an opportunity to provide input in terms of priorities and additional ideas for consideration. And then we're also doing outreach at several upcoming events on the climate work. Oh, thank you, Ross. Actually, I'll give that to you next. And so, for example, we're tabling at an environmental resource fair at the Latino Family Educational Summit this coming weekend at Sonoma State. We are planning to table at both the Santa Rosa and Hillsburg Earth Day events. And we're also going to table at Los Cien's environmental justice and equity event coming up a week from this Friday. And then lastly, wanted to give a brief update on our environmental justice advisors. We are working with several CBOs. We've invited them to contract with us to provide environmental justice consulting and to help us with community engagement and outreach to the community, so that we're including a much more diverse set of inputs into our project. So stay tuned for more information on that, but we are making good progress there. And I think that concludes my update, and I'll turn it over to Suzanne to go into the funding options. All right. I'm going to read those.
So many things. Okay. No, I don't think so. There we go.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Tanya for that. So the other part of the item today is to talk about the polling that is going to hopefully occur this summer, as well as so we want to talk a little bit about that schedule and then talk about what the funding options are for consideration. The slide there shows the there it is, shows the upcoming milestones. Today's meeting, we're going to talk about funding options. April 19th, as Tanya mentioned, is our community workshop. And then the next two board meetings, May 8th and June 12th, we would like to present the list of draft projects that the program committees are working on, that would be elements of a potential expenditure plan. And then also a recommendation on hiring EMC to conduct polling in June. The draft poll perhaps could be developed in time for that May meeting, although I'm not super optimistic about that. I think between May and June is when we could hone in on the actual poll language and bring that back to the full board for approval on June 12th. EMC is the firm that did the SCTA polling. So this is sort of an extension on that work where we can assess sort of the questions that were asked then and have some sort of consistency along with that. And they did a very good job for us 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So with that, I would like to spend a minute walking through some of the funding options that we have for a future measure. And just to level set, when we talk about a revenue measure, we're talking about authorization to collect new money. We're not talking about financing. That's borrowing. You have to pay it back. We don't have money to pay it back. We need new money to do this work. So that's just, you know, a clarification on when we say a revenue measure, we're talking about the collection of new money from taxpayers. So the table here is meant to show a whole host of revenue types and who has the authority to collect them or authorize them. All of them require a vote of the public, but there are only certain entities that are allowed to do certain types of taxation. And so the green column there, when I say regional, for the most part, I mean an entity like RCPA or SCTA, but there is one example in here of a gas tax, which could be done regionally. But when I say regionally there, it means the 9 Bay Area counties, and the MTC has authority to place a measure on the ballot to address, to put into place a gas tax. So the three options that are available for the RCPA include a parcel tax, a sales tax, and a vehicle license fee. And there are caveats to each one of those, except for the parcel tax is the most straightforward. RCPA has authority to place a measure on the ballot to ask voters to consider approving a parcel tax. The example that we've used in this presentation is the Bay Area did a regional parcel tax. It was called AA for the Bay, the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. And voters voted on a $12 parcel tax. For Sonoma County, we actually did not reach the 2/3 threshold for that measure, but nonetheless, it went into effect in our county because it received more than 2/3 across the region. The Sonoma County share that is collected on that $12 every year and goes to this effort is around $2 million, just to give you an order of magnitude for that type of a measure. Sales tax. When we started this discussion, RCPA did not have the authority to do a tax. SB 852 last year by Senator Dodd granted RCPA the authority to do special taxes. Sales tax is typically considered a special tax. There is a cap on the amount of local tax that can be instituted within Sonoma County. And we learned in investigating this further recently that technically RCPA does not have authority to put a sales tax measure on the ballot because we are not part of the CAP legislation. So the statute says cities, county of Sonoma, and the Sonoma County Transportation Authority can do tax measures under the CAP. So a sales tax is still an option, but we have to go back to the prior discussion where the RCPA would put together a measure and then have to ask the County Board of Supervisors to place that measure on the ballot. Again, just for order of magnitude, we have our local transportation tax that the SCTA manages. That's a 1/4 cent, and that generates about $33 million, $34 million annually. The third item is a vehicle license fee. The SCTA has authority to put this on the ballot. So we included that as a regional item here. It does have some constraints on the type of projects that can be funded because it's transportation related. The amount is capped at $10, and we have somewhere close to 500,000 registered vehicles in the county. So that's about $5 million a year that would be collected on a $10 vehicle license fee. So those are really the 3 revenue generating options that are under consideration or could be considered by the board for a ballot measure.
Oh, those require 2/3.
They do all require 2/3. That is correct. Next slide, please.
That's right.
Quick question, if I may,
Yeah,
Chair. For the TOT, that would have to be done municipality by municipality.
yes, there are a number of these that cities have authority to do, or the county has an authority to do, but they would have to be individual elections and put on by those individual jurisdictions.
Unless presumably there were a sort of voter signature gathering effort that could potentially make it countywide. Would that, do you know if that would be legal?
I don't know about, so for like a TOT or like an excise tax or utility tax.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
Thanks.
We can follow up on that.
I think generally, it depends on which one, generally, yes, but then there are differences between charter cities and general law cities that may conflict, like, for instance, the excise tax is a great example. Depending on which one you're in, you have different rules. So I think we need more specifics.
And to the initiative issue, just to jump in on that for a moment, there is a measure that has qualified for the November election cycle that would, if it were approved, it's put on by the Business Roundtable, California Business Roundtable, it would require that voter initiatives for taxes and fees would require 2/3 vote as well. Right now, there's simple majority if it's done by initiative. My understanding that we're gonna nail this down. My understanding is the way it's written, if you have a initiative on the same ballot in November as that measure, and that statewide measure passes, your initiative is not valid from that November election cycle. But we will confirm that is the case. So just to run through a couple of slides quickly to talk about how taxes affect the various income levels in our community. So talking, a little bit about just the regressive nature of taxes generally. But this information, it's for these next few slides are statewide numbers. And this shows sort of the share of family income that is spent on sales and excise taxes in California. And as you can see, makes very logical sense. If you have a lower income, a greater amount of your income is going to sales taxes and excise taxes. Reminder that there's no sales tax on groceries or services, but there is obviously on fuel and taxable goods like clothes and such. Property taxes also have a degree of regressivity, and you can see it's a little bit flatter than the sales and excise tax, but some interesting data showing how that works across California. But then in California, we also have a very progressive income tax structure. And so you have the highest earners paying significantly greater percentage of their share of family income in personal income tax. And so when you combine all of those, you get sort of this U-shaped look of how state and local taxes affect different income levels across families. So we tried to take similar look at just Sonoma County. We've got just under 200,000 households in Sonoma County, and this is how income breaks down by the population or by households. So in the previous slide, statewide, the number of households that were at the lowest two income levels was somewhere around 20%, we're more like 15%. And the upper two categories of income were closer to 20%, and we're significantly higher than that. Or I'm sorry, it was 150,000 or more. We're about double that. So we have a higher income population when compared to the statewide numbers. And so we did just some general math to assess what a sales tax impact on households might be based on income levels, assuming a certain amount of income is spent on taxable goods. So in this case, we said 30% of income is spent on taxable goods. It's meant to just be illustrative. It's, I think, a reasonable number for some of those income categories or income levels. But it shows you what the annual impact would be across that income level. So for example, if it's a household of 100,000, 30,000 is spent on taxable goods, a quarter-cent sales tax would cost that household $75 a year. So this last slide, or actually it's not the last slide, sorry, this next slide is meant to show where our sales tax dollars come from. And the sort of the takeaway from part of this slide, at least, is the amount that comes from business to business transactions. So general consumer goods, that's you, me, everybody in the room who buys things. Same with autos and transportation, but business and industry, buildings and construction, and to some degree, restaurants and hotels are coming from non-residents. Now, that's not to say business folks aren't residents necessarily, but it's business to business transactions. So you get a decent amount of revenue collected in sales tax from non-individual households. And then this slide is one I think you've seen before, but we've updated it, showing the populations across jurisdiction, but also what each sales tax rate is in each jurisdiction, and comparing that to the cap. So our cap is 10.25%. The two highest jurisdictions are Cotati and Petaluma at 9.5%. And then you've got a number of jurisdictions at 8.5%, which is the lowest amount across Sonoma County. And that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to go back to any slides if that's helpful, or take questions. And so I guess the reason for the presentation today and the item before you is to give the board an opportunity to think about what options are of the three available to us we should be testing in a poll, what you may or may not be comfortable with, maybe share information about what other jurisdictions might be doing. And I will close with that and take any questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'll see. Go ahead, Director.
Quick question. So
Thompson.
the max is 10.25%. I thought it was 10%.
No, so it's 9% or 6% goes to California. There's 1.25 that goes to local governments, and then we have an additional 3% on top of that.
Is gonna expire.
The 3% was granted through legislation and it expires in 2026. That doesn't mean that taxes that exist under that cap go away. It means you can't add to it unless the legislation is extended.
But that was only 1 additional percent, correct?
Yes.
I
that's
think,
correct.
I think it was, yeah.
I think that's correct. That is correct.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Director?
Yeah, I'm just, you're asking us for guidance on an eighth or a quarter. What's the difference when we're looking at projects, if we haven't looked at projects? What are we giving up?
Well, it's hard to say what you're giving up on a project basis. I can only tell you you're giving up $15 to $18 million a year that could go towards projects. If you're talking about a sales tax, if you're talking about a parcel tax, I think I use the example of $12 that gets you about 2 million in revenue. So I think that's another discussion. Is there an interest in a parcel tax? And if so, do we have an annual number that we would want to pursue? And this is a little bit iterative, because if you don't know what things cost, you don't know how much you need, other than we know we need a local stable source.
So, parcel tax discussion on housing 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's pretty much shut down countywide by opposition from certain groups. I wouldn't be surprised if that opposition was similar in for a tax like this.
There are two. One thing I didn't mention, there are different approaches to a property tax. You can just do a parcel tax, not a property tax, parcel tax. You can say every parcel pays X. Doesn't matter how improved it is, unimproved, big, small, everybody pays the same. Or you can tax it based on certain attributes on the parcel, square footage of improvement or size of parcel. I was involved in some of those housing discussions early days, and if I remember correctly, they were talking about size and having at least one point they were, and that definitely generated a good amount of opposition if you base it on parcel size. But yeah, it's not without considerations.
Director Rabbit?
Thank you very much, and thanks for the presentation. And to that, on the housing front, we did do polling region-wide a year or 18 months ago, and it came back short. So it's not just in this county that there's not an appetite for it. It was the entire 9-county Bay Area. There is going to be, we're having a presentation at our next meeting, I know, from the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, which is probably going to place, and the reason they're going for the bond now as opposed to any kind of sales tax is because of what they found out through the polling. So I personally, it's all about the polling, the expenditure plan, and what you can sell to voters, quite honestly, until we get to that point. It's hard to, I think it's great to review the options, understand the challenges, like you mentioned with the sales tax, and the process that would have to line up in order to bring something forward. But until we do the polling to find out what the appetite is, coupled with an expenditure plan, which really has to be kind of married in the same. So it needs to be seen.
Yes, go ahead, Director.
Differentiation of the different cities with sales tax would definitely, play a role in that.
And I think there are also, discussions happening throughout the county on other tax measure potential, right? Whether it's fire tax or libraries re-upping or childcare or smart, or so some of those are reauthorizations and don't affect the cap. But if they're new, they would.
Director.
Thank you. So from the board today, you're looking for our top three in terms of polling?
I guess, yeah, it's
What's
just
the
discussion.
direction you're looking for?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, and we'll, you know, as I said, we'll come back with a poll, but if you told me today, vehicle license fee, don't even talk about it. It's not, don't poll, don't waste a question. Great, that's some direction we could take. Or if you think it's valuable to see how that flies, we can test that. If there's an order of magnitude on a property tax that like you think we should test if the $100 is possible. Like any guidance would be welcome. Otherwise, we'll give it a stab and hope we don't, you know, miss too badly. That's a terrible metaphor. We'll give it a try and hope we don't miss. We'll give it a swing. How's that?
Vice Chair.
One question that I have, and I was trying frantically to search online, but it turns out there aren't that many sort of election results from 1974. Is when does the Warm Springs Dam bond expire? Because it looks like it was 1974, and just curious. Anybody know?
Never.
It doesn't.
I thought it expired. I thought Grant told me it expires at some point.
No, because that's when I was doing all my GSA financing research, that was what I found out.
It came back, really? So why are we paying forever for something that was built?
It's because it's not Warm Springs Dam, it's for the Russian River water system.
Wow. So I was misinformed. Take that up with Grant. I'll look into that.
There's a term to the bonds, I'm sorry, there's a term to the bonds that were granted, but the measure is for the entire system, which extends beyond just service debt.
So I have to keep paying in my unincorporated well parcel for all you city people to have water. Gotcha.
The room goes silent.
Is the flood protection and recreation? You always move to run
Doesn't
apart.
help the
So,
recreation.
rather than chasing the vice chair down that rabbit hole. I had a question really about sort of the length of term. Typically, when you poll, there's really kind of a couple of things that you pull on: what you were actually trying to fund, the level you're trying to fund it, the measure, the type, and then the length of the term. Would it be possible if we were hypothetically doing a parcel tax to set it to our greenhouse gas emissions, to say that this will run until the county of Sonoma meets its climate goals, understanding that the urgency doesn't go away until we've actually reached that?
So a sunset based on performance?
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably, I don't know how you, you'd have to,
I
what that.
say no. I think you cannot do that.
I could weigh into, I mean, I think there's a measure on the ballot, right, in November that's taking away sunsets, so. In Sebastopol, we're having to rerun a tax measure we already passed, in case that ballot measure doesn't pass.
Wow.
This November, so. No
It-
sunsets.
Interesting. And did I see Director Lowe had her hand up?
Yeah, so Director Lowe
Yeah.
has joined the meeting. And then also, if I can remind, if you can speak a bit closer to the mics, I am having a hard time hearing some members. You don't need to speak directly into it, but closer to it. And hopefully those on Director Bagby and Lowe can hear.
Yeah, I've been able to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I've done, a lot of you know, I'm a political consultant in my other life, and have done a lot of parcel taxes and bonds, and to the chair's point, you can't have an indeterminate sunset. I mean, you have to, and typical parcel taxes do have a sunset and then a re-up. So I think if you're going to do a parcel tax, you have to give them a time period. There have been a few that have gone on without a sunset, but most polling would not allow you to do that. The ones that have been able to do that have been some school districts in some pretty wealthy places where a parcel tax is a drop in the bucket to someone who lives in Atherton or something like that. I mean, $200 a year in perpetuity is pocket change, right? So there's been some, and I'm not sure if it's Atherton or Menlo, I'm not positive, but it's one of those districts. There is some discussion at the state level of a statewide bond, and you should check in as far as the timetable on that. I'm hearing that they're going to wait till 2026, and I would just, sort of think that that's a good thing to find out about. And then I would also, on the housing front, there will be a measure to lower the threshold for passing housing bonds, not parcel taxes, this in November of 2024. So that, if that affects your calculus at all. And the governor also has his proposal, and that will be on as well. So, and that has to do with something to do with homelessness. We're not sure exactly what it looks like, but all of those things have to be thrown in the mix, because everybody's looking at all these things and everyone's trying to find the right election so that they don't screw up the other person's thing. And so everything needs to go forward on that. But I mean, my inclination would be to, obviously you have to do your polling, but I think your sales tax, because it's ongoing, has your best bet. The parcel taxes that I've seen that are on differentiating sizes, and sometimes end up in court because someone will come back and say that's a sneaky way of doing an ad valorem tax, and then they take you to court on that. So I wouldn't recommend that.
All right, thank you so much, Director. Let's go to public comment, and then we'll bring it back for discussion. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Hello, Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. Today in the tax collection line over at the county assessors, that's the deadline to avoid a penalty on your property tax. I go to those things and stand in line to hear what the other folks have to say. And folks aren't really happy about their taxes. And it was mentioned earlier that in one case, this county fell short of the 2/3 on something that's been tried before. The idea of the vehicle taxes. I also go stand in line at the DMV. And I do that on purpose, because you go and hear from people what is on their mind and what's really occurring in the community. And folks are not happy with how much you got to pay for your vehicles. And they're especially not happy that people are trying to limit the types of vehicles they can have and all this other type of stuff that goes on. I'm not one of those people who's a conspiratorial believer and thinks that, government's all about just taking from us and not giving back to us. I actually believe in our local government. That's why I come to these meetings. But I'm here to tell you, I don't think you should spend the extra money on looking at those two things. You're going to try for taxes. First, explain why you need the money. That didn't happen in today's meeting, I guess, because you've been talking about it before. I'm not a Zoomer, so I didn't know what was going on with those types of things. But I think you should just try for one, and that's the sales tax. And in the state, we're already really high on sales tax. So I actually don't think you're going to have any success with this measure. And bless you. And I don't know really why you want more. You got to explain to us why you need more. There's a lot of folks that think that a lot of stuff's just going into the black hole and not really solving any of the problems that we got. So when I see Hearn Avenue interchange finally completed in my lifetime, I've been a part of that process for 22 years, then I'll start to believe that these things can actually come to fruition. Till then, it just seems like you're blowing smoke up tailpipes. So please get a really good dog and pony show together that really explains why you need to raise more sales tax and what you're going to spend it for besides staff and wages. That's really important, because a lot of people think that in the management process, a lot of really highly paid people, and that's not fixing the potholes in our roads. We got really terrible roads right now throughout the county due to the nice rain that came. And that's what's gonna be on people's minds. People are more about immediate stuff. Potholes need to be fixed. So show us how this tax is gonna help fix potholes. There's that group, Save Our SOS, Sonoma County, and they'll push back. Howard Jarvis guy will push back. Sonoma County Taxpayers Association will push back. So please prove your point first. It's called proof up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Do we have any other comments?
Yeah.
From the public first. We'll come back.
Yes. I do see 3 members of the public with their hands up. And we'll start with, where'd my list go? And we will start with Steve Pierce. Steve, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, it's mentioned earlier that the Sebastopol Climate Action Committee sent a document that staff provided to you today. It's funding regional climate action in Sonoma County. And we looked at various funding possibilities. Some of that was covered already. And I do want to point out that that sales tax really, we've already talked about the equity nature of it. It hits low-income households according to a report from Spur in 2017. This is on Bay Area income. Low-income households pay more than 3 times as much in sales taxes as their high-income counterparts. So I really do hope that we can put quite a bit of effort into trying to find other methods that will fund our efforts, since we're really trying to do this in an equitable way. We're trying to make a model that other climate resiliency districts can use in the state. And if we just go down primarily on the sales tax road, I doubt that we'll see our models being replicated. Just to give you a high level look, I hope you do look at the document. It was produced by myself and Woody Hastings and Emmett Hopkins and my wife, Lisa. But to give you an idea of some of the funding that could come, the transient occupancy tax would raise $6.5 million if a 1% tax, that's based on $651 million currently taxable, subject to tax. And the airport fee that the Board of Supervisors could pass, if there was a $7 passenger fee, that would raise $4.2 million. Utility users tax for natural gas at 2%, that would raise $4.2 million. Now, I understand that some of these may need to be passed by cities, but I'm definitely interested in Supervisor Hopkins' idea of some kind of initiative that voters could put on the ballot. And it would hopefully be much more equitable than just the sales tax measure. When it comes to the vehicle registration fee, just to give some history on that, it did come before voters in 2010, failed with 43% of the vote. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission is looking at a bond in 2024. So we need to work out regionally how we can coordinate with other bodies. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next we have in line is Taryn Obaid. Taryn, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to dovetail with the 2 prior comments. I'd like to remind everyone that we've got a lot of seniors in Sonoma County, and there are a lot of social programs such as the pilot for universal basic income underway, which actually is not universal basic income because it excludes seniors. It targets younger families that have opted to have children, and it subsidizes them. That's great. But I want to tell you, I am a senior. I know a lot of seniors, and many seniors right now are really hurting. They're squeezed, they're stressed, their food is the new vacation. because they just can't afford vacations anymore. They can barely afford a day trip. So I'd really like everybody in terms of households are taking a really close look at where the heck they can cut corners, how they can save money. And I think that as a community and as a government, it's only fair that we do the same. We spend a lot of money, and some of that money could be a little bit more efficiently spent. Also, partnerships outside of our region could be result in more efficiencies. Downtown San Francisco is about to hit 40% vacancy rate. Why are we not pushing Sacramento to adjust housing priorities there so that we don't have to take hits economically to overbuild in some regions while others are distressed with excess inventory? What about all of the money printing of this Green New Deal? We can go after grant money to fund some of this stuff. I feel like charging more for gas when seniors I know, they're not putting up solar panels. They can't afford it. They're locked into gas right now for the foreseeable future. Please don't up their gas fees. And please don't charge them extra for taking an airporter to the airport. How about hitting up the people that are driving the high-end Teslas? I guess I'm all over the place here, but please think about the seniors right now. People are very depressed. They still haven't gotten out of their behavior modification from COVID. A lot of them aren't getting outside. They're depressed. They can't get in to see psychiatrists because the backlog persists, and they are getting so squeezed with me and feeling absolutely helpless and hopeless. Please don't hit them up for more money. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Taryn. Next we have is Tom Conlon. Tom, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Tom Conlon from down here in Sonoma Valley. Like so many of the members of the board and members of the public, I'm concerned too about the feasibility of winning over popular support of 2/3 of the voting public for this measure at this time. So I think, and I'm a bit confused by the director's presentation with that long list of possible revenue measures. It appeared that the only 3 that you identified all would require the 2/3 threshold. And it would be helpful, I think, to all decision makers involved in this process if we could focus in on the differences between those mechanisms which are below the 2/3 threshold, given the feasibility, the popular vote feasibility threshold that we are all concerned about. I think some of the ideas from Sebastopol that Steve Pierce expressed bear some merit, but I also realize that there might be more, it's maybe more piecemeal, and we may need to work harder to do it than a countywide sales tax measure would require. I appreciate Director Lowe's comments about the potential legal difficulties of a size or other less regressive parcel tax measure. But again, that probably could be approached in a way that would be more equitable. At least we could do our homework on a parcel tax that might have some chance of surviving such a legal challenge without being the smallest parcels pay as much as the largest parcels. And then to the final, most of the meetings that I've attended with the small group discussions of what should be in the measure to build support. Frankly, the meetings I've been in, buildings and land and water, have not been terribly broadly attended. So I am hoping that we can have a broader conversation about this that brings in some of the people that are more like voters. And I guess that will happen during the polling, but if the list of questions is limited in the poll, we may be we may be at danger of just validating our own biases with a poll. So all good, all comments of caution. I hope we can get some separation of those measures which are below 2/3 in their threshold. Thank you for consideration of my comments.
All right, thank you, Tom. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public with their hands up to speak on this item.
Okay, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the board then. Just as a point of clarification, because I heard the concern from a couple of folks about look at the things that are easier to pass that are below the 2/3. There are none. We don't have any options that we can pursue that are under a 2/3 measure for SCTA RCPA. With the exception of a signature gathering campaign that we would not be able to do. And then there's still, as we heard, potential where another ballot measure would wipe that out, and after substantial work, we'd be deemed not in compliance and it wouldn't pass anyway. But so for us, I think for the board, if we can focus a little bit on what we can do, and the direction that the board would be interested in seeing some polling, I think that might help to narrow our focus a little bit, with the understanding that our committees are still working through what a expanded expenditure plan could look like that addresses climate change. So I'll start looking at Zoom to see if either of my colleagues, Director Bagby or Director Lowe, have any comments or thoughts. Director Lowe?
So my ad valorem tax notwithstanding, and there are some that have gotten through, and you'll have to take a look at them, but they're difficult to construct. And most of them have been thrown out anyway. So just saying that. I still think a parcel tax is worth polling on, with if you have a time determinant, and that you also have a senior exemption. Often those little sweeteners will be enough to get people there, because they know it's not forever, and also you need some sort of piece in there regarding assessment and evaluation, and independent evaluation and assessment ongoing, something like that. And if you do something like that, it's worth polling on. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but I think it's worth it. And, I would also go ahead and look at the sales tax in this same way. But the things that sort of sweeten it to get past the 2/3 usually are, making sure that there's, at least on the parcel tax, that there's some exemption for seniors. And those tend to help. And in this county, there are a lot of seniors. And a lot of them don't avail themselves of the option. So those are my suggestions to test anyway.
All right, thank you, Director. Look to my left. Director Rabbit.
Well, I think we should toss the vehicle license fee, because I do think that historically is just not going to be popular. I question the parcel tax, and I appreciate the sweeteners, as it were. An 1/8 cent to get it to be the equivalent of an 1/8 cent, you'd have to have $100 per parcel. To get the equivalent of a 1/4 cent, you'd have to get to 2. It's worth asking a question just to see, I think, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the sales tax and whether an 1/8 or a 1/4 is what people are thinking. Interestingly enough, I know in the last couple of polls that I've seen, the cap was less of an issue than, because I thought it would be more of an issue. Although 10% plus is significant, and certainly will have something to do with where the state of the economy sits, and inflation and everything else. But I think, again, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, it's going to be really about what are you offering people in exchange for the amount of money that you're asking them to invest, as Mr. DeWitt even said. So I think that's the most important thing for me.
Oh, boy. I would agree with looking at a parcel tax with some exemptions. In my community, we're already at 9.5%, and that's, fairly high, and that was just passed a few years ago. So I'm not sure how that will go, but I still think it's worth polling.
you know, to see the difference between each jurisdiction. I kind of like the idea of the, you know, the Schultz Airport passenger fee. You know, it's that's high in pollutants. And I think that would be something that would be worth polling. I'm not sure on the TOT because I mean, I guess it would be a countywide TOT increase.
And technically, we can't do that. It would be up to the jurisdictions to then do it.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly. So that scratches that one. So I'll stick with these.
Well, I'm happy to see our Sebastopol Climate Action Committee has weighed in on this. I like the idea of the airport thought also. I am concerned about how many taxes are going to be coming up on this upcoming ballot. And I know we're looking at a few in Sebastopol, and I knew about the fire tax that the chiefs are looking at as well. So and I know property tax measures are not popular. So I guess the sales tax measure, or possibly thinking about the airport. And I lean towards the 8th. I'd like to see it smaller versus larger because I'm afraid there's going to be a lot of competition. Thanks.
We're talking November 24th.
Correct.
Well, yeah, hold on the 8th, hold on the quarter, hold on the personal tax. You know, if we're really talking about climate, we should be talking about vehicle license fee, gas tax, airport fees. But I agree with David on the vehicle license. The gas tax is not, we can't do that. So if it's 3, the 2 parcels, the 2 sales and 1 parcel. Yeah, I would concur, and I want to thank Mr. Pierce for his comments. Those were some of the comments I was going to make. Yes, I'm exploring sales tax and the parcel tax in particular. Thanks to Director Lowe for those exemptions. I think it's important. Has there ever been any precedent where all the municipalities would work together on something like TOT tax? Has that ever been done? Has there ever been any agreement on that at all that any of you can remember?
Not that I'm aware of in the last 30 years.
Could part of the polling be reaching out to those jurisdictions and seeing if there's any stomach for that?
Certainly. And I think there was a comment made to me earlier about reaching out to the city managers and talking through this idea with them. They invite me to their meetings. But I do think that it's an interesting I think it's worthy of discussion. I will say in the past, there have been, I think, attempts to do like utility taxes that were at least a couple of jurisdictions together.
Okay. And then
a lot of communicating.
All right. And then on the polluter carbon tax, I know that that's generated from the state. Has there ever been, I mean, noting that we're the only regional climate protection authority in the state of California, has there ever been a thought of earmarking some monies or some kind of a fee with somebody like PG&E or other polluters along those lines and directing it to counties and jurisdictions that have these regional climate protection authorities? Is there any way we can work with Sacramento to earmark some of any of these other funds to come into our jurisdiction, considering what we're doing?
I do like that notion, and I think there's a lot of reason for the state to do that. The ability to sort of earmark as opposed to compete is not something the state has been open to in discussions we've had historically, back when they first did the climate plan and the initial rounds of money that go to things like the cap and trade money that goes to things like high-speed rail. Exactly. You know, there were we submitted comments and urged them to fund local government action, and competitive programs was the best we could get from that. You know, that doesn't mean it's not worth continuing to press for that.
Thank you. And thank you for presenting this.
Yes, thank you. Dwayne made a good point, and that's that, trying to say why we need more, what we need more. I think that that's going to be key in the polling is for folks to really know what it is that you need and why you need it. That message is really very important. What I didn't hear in any of this is, as I'm aware, campaigns are getting more and more expensive to run. I think Sandra probably can address that, but do we have backers to help support a campaign? And again, they might be in or out based upon what it is that you want to do, because some people, are more open to supporting this kind of tax or that kind of tax, because that they are expensive, and having run a few sales tax measures, it gets a little bit hard when you don't have someone funding it and you're out there, beating the bushes and no one's contributing. So that I think will be important. Parcel tax, that's a good concept, but there's a point of pretty soon we're going to be paying more in all of these add-on fees than we are for the baseline amount for our houses. I can only speak to where I'm at, but there's at least 6 Roanoke Park School ones, on there, and then there's the dam, as Supervisor Hopkins pointed out, and a few other ones. And ours, with our fire district, theirs is increasing forever. It goes up every single year. They put on an adjuster on it, and we pay the highest in the county for fire services without even any ambulance protection. So people are kind of looking at some of those things. Sales tax, I think, tends to be, I don't want to say easy, but easy, because it's sort of like people buy goods and they don't really notice it. But as was pointed out, at what point do you hit that threshold? And it's like, oh my goodness, 10% of my bill is now sales tax. So we're kind of approaching that in a lot of different areas. The transit occupancy tax, I think I would be fearful that we'd end up in a situation, if everybody put one on there, that you'd have some cities it would pass and some cities it wouldn't. And then what are you left with? Or do you then not do it, or do you accept the cities that pass? So I think you really have to think real hard about that one, because you could end up with kind of a mixed bag. Good idea, I think, but I worry, since each city has to do that. So other than that, I agree with what's been said.
Director Bagby.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I really appreciate this discussion from all of the directors, and appreciating that this is a report. We're not, making any hard decisions today, but it occurs to me that if we're talking about the why we're going to the voters to ask for funding to create and support these programs, I don't want to throw a parcel tax out. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and here's why. We can talk all day about, should it be a gas tax? Should it be a utility tax on natural gas? Both of which we're encouraging folks through public policy to get off of. And I just like, why my thought with taxes like that is, why are we doing that again when we got burned so badly on the gas tax, when we asked people to conserve, and then they did it, and then we had less revenue. So that's a kind of a cautionary tale that I take into account when I'm, considering issues like this. But specifically, I am not ready to to not consider a parcel tax because, you know, we have climate change and transportation policies because we have bad land use policies. And I think that it's an easy sell to convince people we have to make a fundamental change in the infrastructure of this county in order to improve our quality of life and in order to have a steady form of income to create a just and a green transition. And I think that the case can be made very clear on that when you're charging people per parcel. So, you know, I'm keeping an open mind. I'm considering, I want to, you know, hear back and consider all the possibilities, but I kind of can't escape that there is a certain logic to every property owner in Sonoma County saying, yes, I'm going to pay a fee, you know, every year so that there's a dependable source of funding for our climate goals. And it's one of the least regressive ways of doing that. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we're thinking of it in those terms as well, and kind of still keeping an open mind at this point.
Vice Chair.
Thanks. I'm guessing that Grant Davis is going to murder me in my sleep for bringing this up, but I was actually able to look up the Warm Springs Dam. And I think what I find sort of frustrating about something like that, that's a forever tax, is that at some point the debt is paid off and then you have a lower amount of money, right, for the actual O&M for the dam. And so it looks to me like the debt service has been sort of around $6 million a year. Just because a measure doesn't sunset doesn't mean that you can't bring it back to the voters to look at some sort of change of purpose. And I was, you know, I don't know what's sort of coming out of the lands committee, but when we think about sort of the impacts of, you know, flooding and drought in Sonoma County, certainly there's a need for broader resilience than just the creation of a dam. And it looks like it can also be used to sort of finance water supply and erosion control activities along the Russian River, but there are a lot of areas that are not along the Russian River that are prone to, you know, flooding and erosion and may need assistance in light of climate change. So I just wanted to flag that as something to potentially research as we go forward. And I did email Grant to ask when the debt service itself would sunset and sort of what the plans are for folding that revenue into the future. I am keenly interested in looking at something, just because it's never been done doesn't mean we can't do it. Like this idea of a 1% TOT countywide, even if it takes us all kind of putting it on the ballot. I found that at least in my neck of the woods, folks are always happy to tax visitors as opposed to taxing themselves. And there is a clear nexus to climate. And I kind of like the idea of that plus like a passenger fee on the Schultz Airport, because it, you know, it sort of is a little bit of a return to source, you know, in terms of the impacts of climate. With parcel tax, I'm really curious about how the parcel tax would be implemented. We ran into huge challenges in West County on sort of a fire annexation, not one that was recent, but a prior one that ended up actually taxing parcels that had nothing on it. And that can actually become really costly for people who own tons of little tiny parcels that for some reason are all separate parcels, but don't actually have anyone living on there. So I would assume that we would be looking at something like improved parcels and, you know, potentially even a fee structure. I'd also be curious, given sort of what our demographics look like in Sonoma County, what the sort of senior exemption could mean. Some seniors are very, very able to pay. And so it's sort of frustrating to think about them not paying, where someone who's trying to afford, a young family trying to afford their first home in Sonoma County having to pay. Other seniors absolutely deserve that exemption and are very much in need of that support. So I'm kind of curious about kind of how that works out and how the messaging goes. So I would be very interested in, you know, definitely pulling on the sales tax, because that is often sort of the easiest. Some kind of a TOT and an airport fee. And then really thinking through kind of the parcel tax question, because I think it raises a lot of questions, especially when you look at younger generations, honestly, bearing the brunt of climate change. And then are they the ones who are going to be paying the most in a parcel tax format?
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. Go ahead.
I just have a quick comment on the TOT. Just to throw this out, not all the cities have the same TOT, you know, coming in. And if, say, if Petaluma decides we want to go ahead and raise our TOT, you know, does that throw a wrench in it, and how would you divide those out? And I'm just raising that,
yeah,
as a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think you got a lot of really good feedback from the board. I don't really have a whole lot to add other than just to remind folks that what we're trying to do is install confidence in the public that we actually can meet our climate goals. Yes, it'll cost money. And there's also the flip side of that where my city has spent $100 million over the last 5 years on recovery from a fire that was largely driven by climate change, right? That's quarter-cent sales tax for 12 years to get that $100 million. So there is a cost to it. I want to just make sure that whatever we do, we can sell to the public as actually being transformative for the community, not just looking at what could potentially pass, but what's actually worth passing. So for me, I'm interested in seeing a number of these in the polling to see if we can get there. I am interested if we do a parcel tax poll that we perhaps have an A/B split in the polling to see what's the elasticity of the amount for folks. Is there a big difference for most folks from $50 to $75? And if not, how do we suss that out and explore that a little bit to be able to actually do something that's meaningful? With that, board, I'm going to say it's 4 o'clock. We still have quite a bit of work and we have council members who need to leave for council meetings. So I'll see, does anybody have something that they absolutely have to add to this discussion, understanding it's coming back in a month for further discussion?
Just real
Very
quick, to add on to what Linda said, I think that we should probably do a little research on those that have senior exemptions. There's probably data out there because I think I agree with Sandra. A lot of folks don't take that exemption. So it'd be probably helpful.
Last word, Vice Chair.
Super quick. I'm just wondering if in addition to the Schultz Airport passenger fee, we could at least get some information on whether it's legal for us to also add a fee onto the passenger vehicle rentals that take place at our county-owned airport. And what that revenue generation could be.
It's definitely not for us.
No, you can send it over to John Stout, but I feel like that would be an interesting question and our legal team.
All right. Thank you, board. Let's move on to item 5.2.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors of the board. The item before you is the coordinated claim for transit funding for fiscal year 2023 and to 2024. The coordinated claim documents the distribution of state and local funding for transit. And for fiscal year 23-24, it totals just over $49 million, of which SCTA has discretion over the distribution of just over 46 million of that. So the draft coordinated claim was approved or recommended for the board by our Transit Technical Advisory Committee. We did bring it to our Transit Paratransit Coordinated Committee, as we always do. However, we did not have a quorum at our March meeting. It is due to MTC by May 1st, so our intention is to bring it here and then bring it back to our Transit Paratransit Coordinating Committee at the next meeting, which is in May. So this is an annual document where SCTA develops a coordinated claim for 3 funding sources. It's the Transportation Development Act, the State Transit Assistance, and Measure M funding. And these are the primary sources of operating funding and operating funds for transit operators in Sonoma County. The document documents interjurisdictional funding agreements for transit services in Sonoma County, and as that relates to distribution of the funds. So funding for the coordinated claim is based on estimates prepared by MTC and the county auditor's office. And these funds are subject to fluctuate throughout the year. So this is really the basis of which the transit operators base their claims to MTC, and any fluctuation is accounted for in the next fiscal year. So the Transportation Development Act revenues are derived from a sales tax receipts of a $0.25 and that is a statewide sales tax. These are
These funds are distributed based on population among the 3 local bus transit operators. And that's after a 25% contribution to Golden Gate Transit. And that 25% contribution to Golden Gate Transit is based on a formula established in fiscal year 97. And staff does plan to review that that contribution before the next coordinated claim and review the services that are out there and the appropriateness of that contribution. The next funding source documented in the coordinated claim is the state transit assistance, and those funds are derived from a portion of sales tax revenues collected on the sale of vehicle fuels. There's 2 portions to that funding. There's a population-based fund source that is distributed through a county block grant for local transit, and that is the portion that SCTA does have discretion over. And then there's also revenue-based funds that are allocated to the transit operators, and that is based on the revenues that they generate. So 5 years ago, when we were adopting the fiscal year 1920 coordinated claim, SCTA came up with a formula for distributing those population-based funds for the state transit assistance. We agreed to hold that formula for 5 years. And this current coordinated claim in front of you is the 5th year of that agreement. So we do also intend to look at the appropriateness of that formula before the next coordinated claim that's coming up. Additionally, Measure M funds that go toward transit are documented in this coordinated claim. And that includes 10% for bus transit, split between the 3 local bus transit operators based on their share of the population, and 5% to SMART. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions you might have.
All right, I'm looking to the board. Does anybody have a question? Seeing none, let's go to public comment.
I currently do not see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, Chair Rogers.
All right, I'll bring it back and I'll look for a motion.
I'd like to move this forward.
Second.
Motion from Director Giudice and a second from Director Cater Thompson. Any additional discussion? Let's call the vote.
All right, Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Cater Thompson.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Harvey.
Yes.
Director Hinton.
Aye.
Director Lowe.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins.
Yes.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And we see that passing.
Great, thank you so much. Let's move on to item 5.3 then.
All right, so there in your handout today, there is an updated staff report and link. I'm going to go ahead and just talk through the item and then talk about the differences for the updated document that was shared. So this item is regarding a draft consultant agreement for our Countywide Active Transportation Plan, which includes both the countywide plan and updates to 7 jurisdiction level bicycle and pedestrian master plans. So in February, we brought the request for proposals to you all, and with a full presentation on the structure of the plan, grant that was awarded to us by Caltrans, and the scope of work. So in response to the request for proposals, we received 4 proposals, and our panel, which consisted of staff from SCTA, City of Healdsburg, City of Petati, and the county, reviewed and scored the 4 proposals and recommended interviewing 3 of them. All 3 firms were highly qualified and very impressive. And after interviews, the panelists submitted their final scores and unanimously recommended fair and peers for the contract. Today, we're bringing a draft consultant agreement to you with fair and peers and with their scope of work, and requesting that the board authorize the executive director to finalize and enter into the agreement. So the draft agreement linked in your agenda packet has been reviewed at the staff level and at staff level by the consulting firm, but still needs to be reviewed by our legal counsel and the firm's legal counsel and by Caltrans local assistance as our grantor. So we had some unanticipated changes to the scope and budget come up after the board packet was sent out. And there was a misunderstanding between staff and the consultant on whether SCTA or the consultant would be doing a piece of the contract, and that piece is doing subcontracts with community-based and non-government organizations to partner on public engagement activities. We've since talked with the consulting firm and clarified our intention that we really it would be more streamlined for the consulting firm to do subcontracts with community-based organizations. And essentially that subcontracting assists community-based organizations to look for public meeting spaces, sometimes schedule meetings, facilitate them if appropriate. And really the intention behind this is to get more meaningful engagement with disadvantaged communities and ensure that our plan is responsive to community needs. And so the revised budget includes a $25,000 set aside for the consultant to subcontract with community-based or non-government organizations as partners in the public engagement activities. We also have 2 optional tasks included in the budget. And so there's a range. We have a base budget of $532,000 and then some optional tasks of up to $105,000 and $140,000. Those optional tasks are some deliverables that we are yet to determine the need for and the desire for. One is a detailed sidewalk gap analysis and kind of a range of cost per jurisdiction. So our intention with that is to work with the jurisdictions to determine the need and scope for that more detailed sidewalk gap analysis. And then the second optional task is to assist the 3 jurisdictions that are not participating in this plan update with updating their project list kind of based on our technical analysis. So that is also yet to be determined whether there's a desire from those 3 jurisdictions to participate in that. We would likely need contributions from those local jurisdictions for these optional tasks. And that being said, with the exception of the city of Cooperative, which has already made a commitment to us for some funding that was allocated for their local plan, and they're now participating in the countywide effort. And with that, we actually are working to expedite the development of the plan for Cooperative and including the sidewalk gap analysis in that piece as well. So with that, we are again just asking the board to authorize the executive director to finalize and execute the contract.
All right, I'm looking to the board. Are there any questions? Let's see if there's public comment. Drew?
I currently do not see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
Okay, and anybody in the room? All right, I'll bring it back. Look for a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Director Harvey.
Second.
And a second from the Vice Chair. Let's call the vote.
All right, Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Cater Thompson.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Harvey.
Yes.
Director Hinton.
Aye.
Director Lowe.
Looks like we've lost Director Lowe.
We've lost her. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hopkins
Yes.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And we see that passing.
Great. Let's go on to item 5.4 then.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the main item I wanted to cover today was just a follow-up, and MTC did the work for me, which is great. We like that. There is a handout. If you don't have it, there are extra copies here. Related to the bills that have been introduced to address changes to the Brown Act. I know this has been something a number of board members have been interested in, so wanted to give you these great summaries. We did submit a letter of support for AB 817 and attached to that a number of sort of testimonials from some of our committee members expressing their concern about the return to full in-person and their abilities to sometimes not be able to attend for a variety of reasons, where they could do so remotely if allowed, as they had been during the pandemic. So there are 4 assembly bills that do slightly different things, and then 2 Senate bills as well. I'm not really seeking any action today, but wanted to make sure you were aware of these 6 pieces of legislation and to make sure you know we're tracking them and weighing in when appropriate. Assemblymember Aguiar Curry is the chair of the Assembly Local Government Committee, where a number of these bills will have to go. Director Lowe is not on the call, but she did meet with her chief of staff, Assemblymember Aguiar Curry's chief of staff. And I think there's some trepidation on the part of the committee chair to do anything more this year and to see how things shake out. But I think the good news is there are 6 members of the legislature who not only are sympathetic, but were willing to introduce legislation over it. So hopefully there's enough momentum and demonstration of need that we see some further tweaking to the current requirements. Outside of that, just waiting to see what the May revise will look like for the state budget and impacts potentially to things like transit funding in particular. So there's been a lot of advocacy on the part of transit operators and MTC. We've signed on to letters to the administration and to key budget committee members, urging them to address the transit fiscal cliff and recognize the importance of transit to meeting our GHG and climate goals. That concludes the item there, Mr. Chair.
Great. Let me see if there are any questions from the board. All right, let's see if there's any public comment.
I do not see any public comment online or in the room, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ross. I'll bring it back. I don't believe it says we need action. I don't think we actually need action on this one.
No.
All right. Let's go on then to our reports and announcements. Item 6.1. I'll just let you walk through all of them, Suzanne.
So item 6.1, the advisory committees are included in the agenda packet. If there are any questions, be happy to address them. Our advisory committees are meeting in person. Dana mentioned the coordinated claim. We couldn't get the transit paratransit coordinating committee approval because they didn't have a quorum. So there are some challenges to getting back to in person. Item 6.2, the executive committee did meet prior to this meeting and talked about 2 of the items that were on the agenda today, the climate protection initiative and the coordinated claim. Item 6.3 is regional agency reports.
Do we have any reports?
I can, or
Go ahead, Director.
Supervisor Robbie can. Just want to building a bridge, repairs continue to San Francisco terminal ramp. There was exposed gas line at the larger terminal as well. We're doing some repairs along Alexander Valley Drive. I don't know if any of you saw the slide that took place during the last atmospheric river and the wind event. Winds at the pier in San Francisco reached 75 miles an hour at the surface, which created an unsafe condition to send out the ferries. We adopted a 5-year fare increase proposal with an annual increase of 25 cents per year for the ferry division, the bus division, and the bridge. We did it with a lot of nuance and equity, and actually ratepayers in Sonoma County will find some relief with regards to ferry service in particular. So that was good news. Transportation along the 101 corridor remains depressed, and that was further exacerbated by the storms, resulting in a revenue drop. On the bridge at 20%, 63% for the bus service and 68% for the ferry service. We are filling some ferry service by operating tourism to Angel Island, and we should add another run to Sausalito, I believe, or was it Tiburon? I think it was Sausalito. So that's about it, unless you have something to add, David.
That was great. I think the other, you'll be all happy to know that the singing bridge will no longer.
Oh, that's right.
up
That's
and
right.
down.
The clips.
The, stainless steel clips will, they've ordered 1,000, I think, to see if they work. Then they'll follow up with another 19,000 and place those on the guardrail on the west side. If you, when the wind hits it just right at the right velocity, it does have a very nice hum that the people over in Seacliff and through the Richmond district don't really appreciate. So this will alleviate that, and away we go.
Those don't work. Will they hold together reports?
It could be. They're actually 3 feet long. I
Yeah.
kept thinking they were little clips. We did have this.
We had quite a robust discussion.
Because I kept envisioning clips.
Yeah.
They did adhere to the slats, and part of this, that was part of the wind retrofit, which was really part of the suicide deterrent net. Adding the net affected the bridge in such a way that they needed to let the wind pass through on the west side quicker, so less lateral force on the side. The old railings were little H-beams that were very wide. These are metal slats that allow much more wind and a wind fairing underneath it. So that, and I will also say that we did go to Washington, DC with MTC. Thank them for the 400 million for the bridge, but also ask for a lot of other monies for the projects that are through the Bay Area. And then lastly, I'll just report out while I'm at it, was appointed at MTC to be head of the operations, or chair of the operations committee, which is really going to be called the Regional Network Management Operations, which is the 27 transit agencies in the Bay Area, trying to do what we're doing here, streamline and unify them. And also the fiscal cliff, which we call, I think, this fiscal sustainability subcommittee, figuring out a path forward. And I think we're at a crucial time because of all the components coming together to really come up with a plan for the future of public transit. As you all know, public transit was declining prior to COVID in terms of ridership numbers. It plummeted during COVID. Their federal dollars were huge and helpful, but now it's up to the state if they can come through, but it's also the state won't come through unless the transit agencies basically change their ways and address do business differently than they were doing before. So this will be all part of the conversation going forward.
The Fiscal Sustainability Committee sounds a lot less ominous than the Fiscal Cliff Committee, so probably a good switch. Yeah. Anything additional?
Yeah, I just want to mention that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District took a pretty historic vote earlier, which actually was a zero NOx policy that phases out the sale of gas-powered appliances. And it was actually one of the more compelling meetings I've attended. And we had students from Oakland come and testify about the asthma rates in their families and in their schools. A lot of sort of folks speaking up from disadvantaged communities who are disproportionately impacted by the pollution, and the entire sort of front row was full of physicians. So you had people in their scrubs, there to talk about the patients that they've treated. So kind of an exciting step for the Bay Area, although interesting for Sonoma County, because I also serve on the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, which does not have those regulations. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that shakes out as we move forward.
And the very next day, a bill was introduced to unwind it. I don't think the bill's going anywhere, but something for us certainly to watch as an agency. Any other reports? Okay, let's keep moving.
All right, so the activities report, let's start with Ross, for communications.
Good afternoon, directors. Just a very brief report on communications and marketing activity over the past month. So staff's been working to create new materials to use at some upcoming tabling opportunities in April. This is really starting to be the busy season for getting out there, mainly around Earth Day, but also some other really good opportunities to get in front of the public. We'll be promoting many RCPA related activities, however, also applicable SCTA programs such as the Sonoma Commute Rewards and Emergency Ride Home are also being promoted. Handout cards and signage in English and Spanish with QR codes that direct the public towards these comments or towards these programs have been created with an emphasis on digital assets to avoid too much paper use. Upcoming events include Earth Day programs in Santa Rosa and Healdsburg, as well as the Environmental Resource Fair at the Latino Family Education Summit in April, and also the upcoming Los Cien event. Tomatoes. And then, as mentioned earlier, climate protection initiative efforts continue with 3 program committees meeting in March. Additional outreach will be at these upcoming events, as well as the April 19th public workshop featuring remarks from Congressman Huffman. These activities are supported by email marketing, website updates, and social media messaging. And lastly, SCTA staff created a folding brochure to accompany the executive director and the trip to Washington, D.C. The brochure provides an overview of current SCTA and RCPA activities and requests for federal assistance. Topics include SR 37, interim project, transit, active transportation, climate mobilization strategy, and the new climate protection initiative efforts. And it is interesting to look at just to kind of show the SCTA RCPA priorities, and that is linked. A PDF copy is linked in this month's agenda. So please let me know if you have any questions about communications, and thank you very much for your time.
I would just add, if we send you all a little blurb for social media for the April 19th meeting, if you could put that on your feeds, that would be really fantastic.
We'll be having a lot of things go out tomorrow. So I can send you all the links to the board.
Great. Thank you so much, Ross. Any questions?
Do you have a similar brochure for interfacing with the state? You mentioned you're doing something for the feds. In particular for RCPA.
Not exactly.
We have a climate mobilization strategy.
Yeah, I knew that.
Then I've made there's an insert that goes in that that's promoting the climate protection initiative. Just mainly trying to get people to get involved in those program committees.
I'll be in Sacramento next week, so I was just curious.
Okay. Let me think on that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Director Bagby.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'll see Director Corsi hopefully in Sacramento this week. Is it, are you guys, are the supervisors there next week? Is that what's going on? Okay, so this week is legislative action days for council members. So I don't know if it's like a turnaround, but if we could get that some of that information to us by Tuesday or Wednesday, that might be helpful.
Yeah.
She's right. We go on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, we met on Wednesday morning.
My bad.
Well, we certainly do have some existing RCPA brochures if in both languages if you're interested.
That would be great. Thanks, Ross.
Excellent. Let's go on to climate change. Howdy, BC.
Good afternoon, Chair Rogers and members of the board. My name is BC Caps, Climate Change Program Specialist here with RCPA, and wanted to give you some updates on efforts that our team's been working on the last month. You've heard quite a bit about the Climate Protection Initiative, so obviously we've been very busy on that. Additionally, we had provided some review. We sat on a review panel for the county's RFP that they've just released, seeking consultants to do a carbon sequestration study, potential study countywide. So that's something that we have been assisting the county on with submitting with their review. Also, we submitted a planning grant or an application to the the Office of Planning and Research, their climate adaptation planning grant program. So that was submitted last week, and we're waiting to hear our results on that. We also participated with the Permit Sonoma Environmental Justice Stakeholder Group that was meeting, facilitated as part of the general plan update process. So providing some input on that, along with other county departments and affiliated agencies. This past month also hosted the local government EV partnership, working with a number of EV electric vehicle staff from around the jurisdictions and their fleet managers. As was mentioned about the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, we also submitted a letter of support for that proposed rule change. Was very happy to see that pass. Let's see, we continue to meet with staff from Sonoma Clean Power and from the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division, continuing to coordinate the efforts between our three organizations and specifically looking at efforts around our work on the Bay Area Regional Energy Network that we work with in conjunction with the county's climate team. We also, on March 27th, we hosted our members and partners meeting where we meet with all of the representatives from all the different jurisdictions from around the county to learn about everything that's going on kind of at the local level. I mentioned our work on BayREN, the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, some of the things that are happening, additional information around that. The county's climate team, the CARD team, has actually just released their schedule for new workshops that are kicking off on April 12th. And so those are happening over the course of the next month. Those are general interest workshops that we are hoping to get as many people signed up as possible to learn more about doing building upgrades on their own houses, their own buildings, and then learning about financing and rebate options to bring those costs down. And then wanted to wrap up a little bit of some current stats on our water upgrade saves program, which is run through BayREN, but is managed through our office here. The program is currently active in Sebastopol and Cloverdale. In Sebastopol, current numbers show, let's see, that there's been 191 people enrolled, 166 assessments that have been done, and at least 50 projects that have been completed. In Cloverdale, there have been 72 people enrolled, 61 households assessed, and at least 8 projects fully completed. That program continues to do wide outreach, including information for preparing information in both English and Spanish, a number of video that's been recently completed to do outreach there. The program is also coordinating with the other BayREN program that works on multifamily housing to try to really look at the ways that those two programs can really synchronize and kind of work together more closely. And then finally, I wanted to mention that on the water program, we are looking to sign up new utilities throughout the Bay Area. And there's a meeting scheduled for later this week to meet with a large water utility in the East Bay, looking for additional opportunities to further expand that program. So that wraps it up from the RCPA climate change. If there's no questions, I'll pass it on.
Any questions for BC? Great. Thank you so much, BC. Let's move on to our planning report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and directors. Happy to be here today to talk a little bit about our planning activities that weren't on today's agenda. So starting off with data management and forecasting, Adam's been working with MTC and ABAG and the Sonoma Napa Housing Collective to streamline housing and land use data collection efforts and make it a little bit easier on our local partners and planning staff. So, make sure there aren't as many data requests going out at the same time. So moving on to planning, on the Vision Zero side of the house, we're preparing on submitting a federal Safe Streets and Roads for All grant application this summer. We've been working with local staff to identify safety-oriented projects and programs that implement actions that are outlined in the Vision Zero Action Plan and local road safety plans. So we're expecting to return to you in June with a proposed list of projects and to recommend authorization to apply for this grant application. Moving on to mobility programs, staff will be working with a contractor on website development in order to unify branding of transit providers and make wayfinding more seamless for the users. Staff are also working with a consultant team from TY Lynn and Nelson Nygaard to collect data to summarize and understand current transit ridership and routes. So all of this work will help inform the integrated transit service plan. Looking at safe routes to school, the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition has held kid and family learn to ride lessons and promoted the March and Roll for Miles challenge to encourage students to walk and bike during the month of March. So a lot of activities going on there. Moving to travel demand management, staff will continue to work on Commute 37, the Emergency Ride Home Program, the Sonoma Commute Reward Program, and Go Sonoma program. So please visit gosonoma.org for more information as those are developed. And then finally, looking at funding programs, the Transportation Development Act, Article 3, and Transportation for Clean Air Fund applications have been reviewed that were submitted by local agencies. The CVPAC, TAC, and TTAC will be reviewing those over the next month or so. And the final programs of projects for those will be brought to you next month in May. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and I and the planning team are here to provide more information.
Any questions? Sounds great. And last one, projects and programs.
Good afternoon, directors. The programming and projects activities report is in your agenda packet, but I'll just give you a couple of quick updates that I'd like to draw your attention to. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so the first is that the 116-121 intersection improvement project has had its allocation vote at the CTC last month. And so that's great news. The construction funding is available, and we anticipate that that project will go to bid next month. The second thing that I wanted to draw your attention to was a few slides that I wanted to show you. The California Department of Technology is using the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, otherwise known as the IIJA Act funds from the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program to fund Caltrans projects to implement the middle mile broadband projects on the state highway system. In District 4, the projects make up about 922 miles. Thank you. So this is a map of the middle mile broadband projects in Sonoma County. You can see that the projects hit all our major corridors. Highway 1 in
There we go.
okay, sorry. You can see that it hits all our major highway corridors, Highway 1 along the coast, 101 through the center of the county, and highways 12 and 121, 37 in the east and the south. Thank you. And this is a list of the specific post miles along those corridors. If you would like more information, we would be happy to request a presentation from Caltrans at a future meeting. Next. And finally, we also wanted to alert you to a hearing on the proposed tolling for the Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project that will be happening on April 24th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. in Vallejo. The hearing will be available in both in-person and virtually. And the hearing is to discuss the proposed tolling on Highway 37. The California Transportation Commission's approval is required. So the CTC will be considering the issue at their meeting in San Francisco on May 17th and 18th. And there will be a presentation about this at your board meeting on May 8th. That ends my presentation. Mr. Chair, I'll read it back to you.
All right, any questions from the board? All right, thank you so much. Anything additional to add, Madam Executive Director? All right, let's do public comment then on our reports that we just heard.
I'm currently not seeing any members of the public who wish to speak on the reports we just heard, Chair Rogers.
All right, I'm not seeing anybody in the room either. Any additional discussion from the board members? All right, let's see if there are any announcements. Seeing none, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
There you go.